$1 million neighborhood was constructed on land that had been in his family for over a century. However, when Elijah presented a handwritten clause dated 1923, the entire development and every home within it legally reverted to his ownership. Elijah Jackson didn't require an alarm clock. For 30 years, he had woken naturally just before sunrise, made his coffee, and walked out to the back porch of his father's old farmhouse near Opelika, Alabama. From that quiet wooden deck, he had a clear view across the southern field, the very field where his great-grandfather Otis grew sweet potatoes in the 1930s, and where Elijah's own children had once played in the tall grass. But that morning, something was amiss. The ground felt altered. It trembled. Elijah peered into the distance. Beyond the trees, past the fence line, plumes of red dirt rose into the sky. The machinery was present, heavy, loud, and incongruous. He placed his coffee down and headed towards the sound. Reaching the ridge, he halted, stunned. 3 bulldozers were visible. Behind them, construction teams in hard hats and neon vests were marking the ground with flags, as if claiming it was unclaimed land. But it wasn't. He quickened his pace, the Georgia clay swirling up around his boots. "Hey," he called. A woman in a light gray blazer turned toward him, sunglasses and a clipboard in hand. She seemed out of place in a field. She appeared someone who had never worn work boots. "Can I assist you, sir?" she inquired, her voice suggesting she already anticipated the response. Elijah surveyed the scene. "What is the purpose of your presence on my land?" Her eyebrow showed little movement. This parcel was approved for residential development under West Haven HOA's expansion permit. "You must be mistaken." "Mistaken?" Elijah's voice rose slightly. "My name is Elijah Jackson. That piece of land has been in my family since 1923. It is not for sale. It never has been." The woman held her clipboard up like a shield. "County records indicate this section was listed as unclaimed due to boundary discrepancies during the last zoning update. You are welcome to speak with our legal team, but construction is already underway." Elijah's heart was thumping hard now, but not from fear. "Ma'am, that land is not unclaimed. I have walked it every morning since I was 27 years old. My father was born right over that rise. You're building on ground that holds more history than you could encompass with your permits." She offered a polite, empty smile. "Then I suggest you take it up with zoning and planning. We're moving forward." The machines revved louder behind her. Foundations were being dug. Trees that once shaded Elijah's childhood baseball games were now being stripped away root by root. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply turned and walked back towards his house. His pace was slower now. Inside, he went directly to the cabinet above the fireplace. It held old papers, maps, and deeds, dusty and yellowed with age. He recalled his father once saying Otis didn't trust anybody with this land, not even the government. At the time, Elijah had considered it mere paranoia. But as the ground outside was being torn apart, that paranoia felt more like protection. He carefully unfolded the brittle deed and saw it. The faded ink revealed Otis Jackson's name. 88 acres were purchased for $480 in 1923. There were no loans, no banks involved. It was built on sweat, grit, and the unwavering pride of a man determined to leave nothing for anyone else to claim. Elijah settled down. Documents lay before him. A growing unease began in his stomach. Something felt amiss. This wasn't simply a clerical error. He reached for the phone and contacted the Lee County Zoning Office. "I'm calling regarding a construction crew impacting a portion of my property. My name is Elijah Jackson. My family has owned this land for over 100 years. The person I spoke with initially responded with a detached, scripted tone. They stated that if my land was affected by the zoning realignment, I should have received a mail notification. I did not receive any notification. They suggested that notices can occasionally be lost, and then ended the conversation. It was dismissed with that, lost. Potentially, decades of family ownership could be jeopardized by a misplaced envelope. However, Elijah wasn't solely feeling anger. He recalled a story his father had shared with him. Years had passed since Elijah had last touched the old trunk located at the back of the hallway closet. He pulled it out slowly, coughing as dust filled the narrow corridor. His knees cracked as he knelt, unlatching the brass lock. The lid opened with a tired creak. Inside, among black and white photos, funeral programs, and Otis's tarnished railroad watch, was a bundle of paper wrapped in oilcloth, precisely where his father indicated it would be. Elijah was seated on the floor, cross-legged, carefully unrolling the cloth and retrieving a weighty, leather-bound envelope. This was the original deed, the one Otis had kept for himself. Initially, it appeared like any other legal document: printed text, handwritten notes in the margins, a wax seal partially worn. However, concealed roughly midway through the second page, in Otis's faint, cursive writing, was something unexpected. In his own handwriting, squeezed into the margins, a note read, "If any buildings are built on this land without the agreement of the deed holder or their closest relative, those buildings will automatically belong to the deed holder and no payment will be given." This was witnessed and signed on February 2nd, 1923. Elijah blinked. He read it again and again. His hands trembled. He wasn't legally trained, unlike lawyers, but he knew the story behind that clause. It concerned how Otis had distrusted men in suits, particularly landmen. Following a near deception in 1931, where he almost sold half the property for a minimal price, Otis had personally compensated a notary to assist him in drafting what he termed a safeguard impenetrable to any attempt to bypass it. This safeguard wasn't constructed from physical materials like wood or wire. It was comprised of carefully chosen words. Elijah reached for the telephone once more. He contacted Mr. Boone, the local attorney his family had relied on for 3 generations. "I need to show you something," Elijah stated. "It's about the land, about Otis." After 3 hours, Elijah was seated in the worn leather armchair, facing Boone's desk. The lawyer peered through bifocals, carefully examining the document. "Well, he remarked, tapping a knuckle against the clause. "You don't see this kind of thing anymore, but it's clever. If this was notarized and filed with the original deed, it's enforceable." "It is notarized," Elijah said. Otis made absolutely certain of that. Boone nodded. "It's old, yes, but if it's on the record, it's still the law. It might be buried in archives somewhere, but that doesn't make it disappear. So what do I do?" "First," Boone said, pulling a legal pad toward him, "you don't say a word to those developers. Let them build. Every house they finish becomes yours. It wasn't due to your identity, but because of Otis. That man didn't simply leave you land. He left you a carefully constructed snare. A remarkably clever one." Elijah relaxed, feeling the significance of it acutely. He's been prepared to initiate a conflict, enter courtrooms, and navigate bureaucratic hurdles to demonstrate what rightfully belonged to him. But Otis had already handled the struggle. Now, Elijah only needed to wait. Nevertheless, he wasn't foolish. He contacted 2 additional lawyers, just to be certain. One for Montgomery, one for Birmingham. He provided them with scanned copies of the deed, the clause, and the notarization. Both contacted him again within a week. "This is the most secure private property clause I've ever encountered," one stated, "Mr. Jackson. It's as if your great-grandfather constructed a legal landmine." The other remarked, "I've never seen anything like it. As long as you record the construction, everything they build becomes yours. Every nail, every foundation." Consequently, Elijah purchased a drone and employed a professional surveyor. Motion sensor cameras were installed along the southern field's edge. He meticulously documented everything. This included timestamps, recorded footage, ground measurements, copies of sale signs, and open house flyers. Each day, he observed the actions of the West Haven HOA, actions that he believed they should never have taken. They constructed as if they held absolute ownership and marketed as if they had the right to sell. But Elijah understood the truth. And Otis? Otis had anticipated this day for 100 years. If the clause proved to be true, Elijah understood he had a single course of action remaining: to wait. Each morning, shortly after sunrise, Elijah would position himself on the grassy ridge, the the sight of the former barbed wire fence. He would rest against the wooden post that he and his father had set into the ground many years prior, with his arms crossed and a camera around his neck, observing. The land below was undergoing change. Where sweet potatoes once grew and his cousin had broken his leg attempting to ride a makeshift dirt bike, now stood rows of modern homes. The exteriors featured vinyl siding in muted colors, fenced-in backyards, and driveways so smooth they didn't feel like they belonged in the country. It felt like watching someone else rearrange your childhood memories without permission. Roads were paved with names like Sycamore Lane and Sunset Walk. Pretty names, but lacking any history. Light poles were installed, sidewalks were poured, and even a cul-de-sac was added that cut right through the grove where Elijah's mother had planted muscadines. The HOA proceeded quickly. Too quickly. Within a month, foundations were set for 20 homes. Real estate agents began appearing on weekends, conducting open houses and offering guided tours to couples and retirees. Large signs near the front entrance announced, "Now selling," starting at $385,000. Elijah remained silent. He simply observed. He recorded everything. Daily drone footage was recorded. Close-up photos of property markers were taken. Videos documented workers pouring concrete, installing electrical lines, and setting frames. He organized all of this in a folder on his laptop labeled Otis's Revenge. Occasionally, a project manager or a site supervisor noticed him. Sometimes they waved. Once a man with a clipboard called out, "Morning," with forced cheerfulness. Elijah did not reply. His purpose was not to socialize. He was there to observe. Then Jessica arrived. Jessica Brenner. She remained consistently the woman she had always been, clipboard and blazer. Initially, she didn't recognize Elijah upon his reappearance at the Ridge. However, within 3 weeks, she began to acknowledge him. On one occasion, she smiled and called out, "Still watching us, Mr. Jackson?" Elijah responded by raising his camera and photographing her. She did not smile again afterward. New houses appeared rapidly, like weeds spreading. The swift pace was unsettling. One day, there would be bare ground. 3 days elapsed, and the construction reached the stage of a complete frame and roof. By the close of the second month, 32 homes had been framed. Of those, 16 were completed, featuring laid sod and polished front porches ready for weekend viewings. Elijah, however, remained undeterred. He proceeded to the county clerk's office to retrieve the most recent sales records. He observed West Haven's name appearing alongside buyers, with the buyers primarily from out of state, Ohio, Florida, and even some originating from California. He meticulously recorded observations, noting each closing date. He verified the location of each home, confirming its presence within the 88-acre zone. All residences were situated inside Otis's boundary. All of them. He even overheard Jessica one morning, speaking on the phone while walking the site. She said, "Yeah, Phase 1's flying off the market. We're starting Phase 2 next month. No issues on our end. The local guy watching from the Ridge, just some nosy landowner trying to stir up drama. We're clear." Elijah clenched his teeth, but remained silent. She had no idea. He possessed 3 legal opinions supporting his position. He had documented evidence, with timestamps, of construction on the contested land. He had Otis's clause, and crucially, he had time. Allowing them to build wasn't merely a tactic, it was a matter of justice. Each home they finished, every square foot they sold, contributed to a debt they were unaware of accumulating. Elijah had already calculated the figures. If the construction followed the initial plan for all 156 homes, along with the community clubhouse and parkland, the total value of the real estate would approach $70 million. This would be transferred to him. Jessica believed she was developing a neighborhood, but Elijah understood the reality. She was, in effect, expanding his portfolio. However, as the sold signs accumulated, Elijah started questioning how long he could delay the arrival of actual families. The first time Elijah observed children cycling on the newly constructed sidewalks, he experienced a disconcerting sensation in his chest. A profound sadness, not anger nor regret. The children were oblivious. Naturally, they played, circling, chasing, laughing as children do. Their parents watched, enjoying coffee on porches overlooking the Jackson property. This was land Elijah's great-grandfather had cleared manually. A few houses down, a young couple was unpacking boxes. The man waved. Elijah raised his hand a little without knowing why. He was unfamiliar with them. They were unfamiliar with him. The new driveway occupied what had previously been his grandmother's garden. He walked home at a slower pace that day, not due to any need discomfort, but because the anger that had propelled him was beginning to transform into a different feeling. That evening, he was alone in his den, the deed spread out before him, as usual. The clause remained present, tangible, and still his. However, now he saw faces connected to the houses. He recognized people, not suits, not developers. Families were attempting to establish themselves on property they were unaware was not available for purchase. He reached for the telephone and contacted Boone. "I need to discuss something with you," Elijah stated. Boone responded, "I'm listening." Elijah continued, "If I delay until all the houses are completed, the price will increase significantly. However, if I intervene now, I might prevent these people from facing a difficult situation. They've just moved in, Boone. I observed a young girl riding a bicycle with training wheels today." A considerable silence followed. Boone's voice softened. "That presents a difficult ethical decision, Elijah. You are requesting something that is not permissible. It's a personal matter. Legally, you are justified, as Otis confirmed. However, what kind of justice do you seek? I am unwilling to cause harm to these individuals," Elijah stated. "Yet, I do want West Haven to be held accountable. They didn't merely trespass. They obliterated my family's history as if it held no significance. Then perhaps the true inquiry is it possible to inflict pain upon them without harming the people who purchased those homes in good faith?" Elijah rubbed his eyes. "Is it possible?" Boone paused once more. "Gaining their commitment requires careful consideration and meticulous attention to detail. Allow them to actively participate in the process, enabling them to take ownership. Ensure your guidance is clear and impactful, so it resonates even before others become involved." Elijah reclined in his chair. The ceiling fan rotated slowly above him. "I observed someone planting a tree today," he remarked quietly. He appeared pleased, as if envisioning this as their permanent residence. "Perhaps it still could be," Boone responded. "The outcome relies on your actions." That night, Elijah experienced little sleep. He revisited the perimeter of the property, holding a flashlight, observing lights shimmering from windows overlooking the southern field. Within those houses, families were establishing themselves, displaying pictures, preparing meals, and putting children to sleep. He couldn't have been responsible for their losses, yet he couldn't overlook the arrogance of West Haven, Jessica Brenner's dismissive gesture, the unanswered calls from their lawyers, and their disregard for generations, as if constructing on unclaimed territory. Elijah remained motionless for an extended period at the tree line. The wind rustled through the tall grass. He recalled Otis, remembering the nights that man had kept watch on the porch, a shotgun resting across his lap, prepared for any trouble. Otis favored immediate action. However, Elijah valued strategy and carefully considered his options. He resolved to wait until the final brick was in place, not to inflict harm upon the families, but to ensure those who had shown disrespect towards his family faced the complete consequence. And then, he would ensure no one ever forgot the name Otis Jackson, but Elijah understood that patience wouldn't simplify the next phase. It would only make it more significant. The notification arrived by mail, enclosed within a polished invitation featuring gold detailing. "You are cordially invited to the grand opening of West Haven Estates, Phase 2 celebration and ribbon-cutting ceremony. Join us for food, live music, and a look at the future of luxury living in Easter Alabama." Elijah examined the card for a minute before setting it on the kitchen counter beside the deed. The event was scheduled for a Saturday morning in April. At that time, 138 homes were completely built. An additional 18 were undergoing final inspections. The community center had recently opened, featuring a pool, tennis courts, and a marble floor lobby resembling a country club. It was being hailed as the crown jewel of the county, and every inch of it was situated on Jackson land. The night before, Elijah carefully ironed his only suit, the one he wore to church, weddings, and funerals, paying special attention to the cuffs, a detail Otis would have emphasized. He packed a leather folder containing the original deed, the notarized clause, the surveyor's report, photo evidence, and legal opinions. He placed it on the passenger seat with the care one would give a newborn child. As he arrived at the newly paved entrance of West Haven Estates, the morning sun broke through. Banners fluttered in the breeze. A white tent stood on the clubhouse lawn where guests enjoyed champagne and sampled small sandwiches off silver trays. He parked near the back of the lot, concealed from view. No one recognized him. Not yet. From the periphery of the gathering, Elijah observed as Jessica Brenner, wearing a vibrant yellow dress and large sunglasses, approached the podium. Microphones were adjusted. Camera flashes went off. "Welcome," she exclaimed. "Today signifies both the completion of our second phase and the beginning of a promising new era for our community." Applause resonated. The mayor stood beside her. Several county officials, whom Elijah had contacted months prior without receiving a response, were also present. Jessica continued, her voice gaining intensity with each phrase. "Thanks to our exceptional team and the backing of our local government, West Haven is now a home to 156 families and expanding." The string quartet played gently in the background. Elijah moved forward deliberately, the sound of his shoes on the gravel noticeable. Jessica looked towards him, but showed no reaction. Not yet. He raised his voice just enough to be heard over the music. "Before you cut that ribbon," he said calmly, and the crowd fell silent, heads turning. Jessica blinked. "Mr. Jackson," she said, her voice strained. "This is a private event." "I understand precisely what this concerns," Elijah stated. "That is why I am present." The mayor appeared doubtful. "Could you please elaborate on the problem?" Elijah raised a leather folder. "I am Elijah Jackson. My family has held title to this land for more than 100 years, and every house, road, tennis court, and mailbox West Haven constructed sits on property that was never legally theirs." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the audience. Jessica moved away from the podium. "We pursued all legal avenues. A zoning error occurred some time back that you failed to fix," Elijah added, opening the file. "And significantly, this deed from 1923 includes a provision drafted by my great-grandfather. It specifies that any building constructed without permission transfers ownership to the deed's owner." He presented the document. A reporter, standing close, moved to photograph the page. Jessica's expression remained unchanged. "You're attempting to deceive us," she whispered. "That clause is invalid after this length of time." Elijah remained unmoved. "I've had this examined by 3 lawyers. They all concurred. It carries legal weight. This land belongs to me, and everything constructed upon it as well." A man in a gray suit spoke quietly to Jessica. She visibly paled. The mayor cleared his throat. "We might need to suspend the ceremony." Jessica faced Elijah again, her voice now firm. "You observed. You monitored our construction, and you remained silent. I informed you on your initial visit that it was my land," he stated calmly. "I saw you smile, and you called security, instructed me to speak with your legal team. So I did." A gasp came from behind you. It could have been a homeowner or someone else. Reporters were now gathering, with flash bulbs popping and pens writing furiously. Jessica appeared as if she'd swallowed glass. "You'll never get away with this," she whispered. "I don't have to get away with anything," Elijah replied. "You passed the folder to me." He closed it carefully and stepped back. The ceremony was halted. No ribbon was cut. Elijah recognized this as merely the initial stage. The significant repercussions hadn't yet materialized. The following morning, Elijah's phone began ringing before sunrise. An unknown number appeared. He allowed it to proceed to voicemail. Subsequently, it rang again and again. By the afternoon, he had accumulated 12 missed calls for voicemails and 2 emails flagged as urgent from West Haven's legal team. By evening, The local news had broadcast a segment entitled "Man Claims Ownership of Entire HOA Community." Is it legal? The anchor appeared bewildered. Elijah was not. He was at his kitchen table with Boone, examining the deed for what seemed like the 100th time. The wording hadn't changed. The ink remained faded but legible. Boone reclined. They are panicking. They constructed a $1 million project on land they didn't own. You possess every advantage. That night, West Haven's president telephoned directly. Elijah didn't recognize the voice. He had never communicated with the man previously, but he detected the strain. "Mr. Jackson, I believe it is time we consider a resolution. We are keen to resolve this matter swiftly and discreetly. The current media coverage is not beneficial to anyone involved. We are ready to provide you with appropriate compensation for the land's assessed value, alongside a goodwill premium." Elijah didn't react with laughter, though it was evident he was restraining himself. "You're suggesting a payment equivalent to the land's previous worth, prior to the construction of the luxury neighborhood? That's a significant offer. It feels like an offensive proposition." Elijah stated, "You didn't simply relocate Earth. You sold property you didn't own. And now you wish to purchase it at a reduced price after you sold it for millions?" Silence followed, and Elijah could hear the breathing on the other end. Controlled. Stiff. "We could challenge this, Mr. Jackson." "You could." Elijah concurred. "But every home you constructed is already sold. Every buyer now has to question who owns their house. You wish to fight? That will be complicated, costly, and public." Another lengthy pause. "We'll be in touch." The line disconnected. 2 days later, the formal offer arrived via courier. The offer included $4.2 million for the land, a non-disclosure agreement, and a confirmation that Elijah would relinquish all claims to the structures built. Boone reacted with disbelief, nearly choking on his coffee. "I've seen offers disguised as bribes before, but this is exceptional," he remarked, pushing the proposal away. Elijah remained silent, his attention fixed on his neighbor's children using a trampoline recently installed where his grandfather used to park his tractor. He was unwilling to have those children displaced. He was unwilling to have those families hurt. However, he also would not allow West Haven to escape with minimal consequences. Therefore, Elijah prepared a response. He refused the offer, requesting the complete assessed value for each sold home and unsold lot, reduced by a 10% discount for a comprehensive settlement. He pledged not to initiate eviction or repossession, but stipulated that West Haven must cover the legal expenses for each homeowner requiring a revised deed. He insisted on ownership of the community center, parks, and all remaining properties, requesting $61 million. There were no restrictions on speaking publicly, and a public apology was required. Jessica did not contact anyone. Her name was absent from any new official communications, though Elijah received reports. She was reportedly on leave. Some believed she had been dismissed, while others said she resigned. Regardless, the dispute had escalated to the boardroom. During the following 4 weeks, legal representatives from both parties met almost daily. Boone and Simone were seated opposite West Haven's corporate counsel, meticulously negotiating while Elijah largely observed the proceedings. They explored various approaches, proposing a reduced sum, hinting at arbitration, and even implying Elijah had knowingly permitted construction to proceed. Elijah remained composed, stating, "You built on my land. I didn't request it. I cautioned you against it. You disregarded me." Ultimately, West Haven conceded. The concluding agreement was finalized 6 weeks after the unsuccessful ribbon cutting. Elijah's total compensation amounted to $54 million, along with ownership of the community clubhouse, the undeveloped lots, and complete legal authority to oversee the correction of homeowner deeds, ensuring no families were displaced. The settlement was formally revealed at a public press conference. Elijah made brief remarks, expressing gratitude to his great-grandfather for his vision and noting that the past occasionally safeguards the future. He departed quietly, avoiding any media attention or interviews. A desire for tranquility remained. However, Elijah wasn't complete. He needed to ensure Otis's legacy represented something greater than retribution. The funds didn't alter Elijah, not in the anticipated manner. He continued to reside in the familiar house, the aged farmhouse where he'd spent his childhood, where his mother's cooking had permeated the walls with the aroma of fried okra, and where Otis's hammer marks were still evident in the doorframe. He didn't purchase a new truck, didn't relocate to a larger city, didn't install fencing around the land. He did, however, create something tangible. Several months following the agreement, Elijah utilized a segment of the funds, approximately $18 million, to purchase an additional 40-acre parcel of land situated 10 miles east outside the town of Tuskegee. This was land that had remained unclaimed for decades. He designated it the Otis Project. Working alongside local contractors, teachers, and community leaders, Elijah initiated the construction of what he envisioned as a unique neighborhood, designed not for financial gain, but for individuals who had previously been excluded from residing in areas like West Haven. The homes were offered at cost, with mortgage support integrated into the program, and applications were evaluated with empathy rather than relying solely on credit scores. Within the first year, 24 homes were finished, and each was occupied by a family. Individuals from all walks of life, teachers, single parents, factory workers, veterans, were welcomed, regardless of their circumstances. One morning, while standing on the first street of the Otis Project, Elijah observed a group of children playing tag on a front lawn. One little boy sparked a memory of his brother Curtis when they were 7 and too stubborn to wear shoes during summer. Boone arrived later that afternoon, holding a clipboard and a wide grin. "You know what they're calling you in town now," he said. Elijah raised an eyebrow. "What?" "The accidental mayor," Boone chuckled. "People say you were given millions, and instead of vanishing, you began constructing front porches." Elijah smiled. Otis didn't nurture hoarders. He cultivated workers. This wasn't merely words. Elijah utilized a portion of the remaining funds to establish a community center in Opelika, offering complimentary tutoring programs, job placement assistance, and a garden where seniors instructed children on cultivating tomatoes that weren't purchased from a grocery store. He also transformed the former West Haven Community Clubhouse, which he now legally owned, into a shared resource center, renaming it Jackson Hall. The tennis courts were made available for complimentary lessons to local young people. The pool offered dedicated swim times for seniors 3 mornings each week. While the Homeowners Association initially disapproved, the homeowners themselves greatly appreciated the changes. Initially, a small number of residents distanced themselves from Elijah, fearing he would seize their homes and viewing him as an adversary. Eventually, they understood that he didn't intend to dismantle what they had established. He simply desired recognition for the work his family had previously undertaken. Now, many approached him directly, seeking information about repairs, suggestions for local services, or guidance on cultivating vegetables in Alabama's challenging red clay. He consistently offered assistance to everyone. "I ain't trying to be a hero," he told a vet, a single mom, and one of the new homeowners. "I simply believe land should never be taken without acknowledging those who labored upon it previously." Yvette nodded. "Well, my son considers you a kind of superhero," Elijah chuckled. "Have you ever seen me attempt to change a flat tire?" He's likely to reconsider quickly. With the commencement of the second year of the Otis Project, Elijah made a final visit to the county archives. This building, where he initially retrieved the original deed, now displayed a framed photograph of Otis Jackson. Below the photo was a plaque that read, "In honor of the man who protected his land so his descendants could protect their community." Elijah stood silently for a moment, then reached into his pocket. He removed a small object wrapped in cloth, Otis's old railroad watch. He carefully set it on the glass counter close to the display. "I always detest being late," Elijah murmured. The sky outside had shifted to that gentle golden hue just prior to sunset, the very shade Otis would often appreciate following a lengthy day in the fields. Elijah smiled, not the smile of a victor, but the smile of one who had fulfilled an obligation. For ultimately, the clause wasn't simply about preventing thieves, it was about ensuring no one overlooked those who preceded them. And now, the land was speaking once more, its voice stronger than the sound of the bulldozers. If this narrative resonated with you, please consider subscribing. More stories such as this, authentic, unfiltered, and grounded in truth, are forthcoming. The dog appeared to be solely for emotional support, but when the child performed a quiet signal, the dog revealed a truth that had remained unspoken. The courtroom in Toledo, Ohio, felt overwhelmingly large for her. 8-year-old Tanya Ellison sat upright in her chair, her feet dangling above the floor, holding the leash of her golden retriever, Milo, firmly in her hands. Her braids were neatly done, and her pink barrettes made a quiet clicking sound with any head movement. She spoke little, showed no signs of nervousness, simply remained still and observant, appearing remarkably composed for a child in a room filled with unfamiliar faces, awaiting a discussion of subject no child should need to comprehend. Beside her, Milo remained motionless as well. He sat close, his eyes partially closed, his comforting presence against her leg. Many assumed the dog's purpose was to ease her anxiety and provide a sense of security within the imposing environment. And while that was a contributing factor, there was a deeper significance, far more than met the eye. From a bench, Judge Mark Halbard looked down. He was in his 60s, his gray hair thinning and his glasses perpetually sliding down his nose. Throughout his career, he had presided over numerous cases, gang violence, difficult family court proceedings, and even widely publicized trials. However, something about this young girl held his complete attention. Perhaps it was the calm focus in her eyes, or perhaps it was the dog, or maybe it was the fact that not a single person in the courtroom, even the defense attorney, was able to elicit a reaction from her. The room held a considerable number of people, enough that quiet murmurs occasionally arose as someone moved closer to whisper. Seated on the left was the defendant, Russell Banning, a man in his late 40s with short hair, a pressed shirt, and his hands carefully placed in his lap. His lawyer repeatedly tapped a pen against the table, anticipating the cross-examination. Tanya had not yet glanced at Russell. Kendra Ellison, her mother, was seated 2 rows back, quietly holding a tissue in one hand and a cross necklace in the other. She hadn't uttered a word since entering the building, simply keeping her gaze fixed on her daughter, hoping the moment would quickly pass. She feared it wouldn't. Judge Halbard then cleared his throat. "Mrs. Ellison, are you ready?" Tanya glanced at her court-appointed therapist, who offered a slight nod from the front bench. She did not return the smile, only offered a single nod. "Yes, Your Honor," the therapist responded on her behalf. "She is ready." The judge nodded briefly and turned to the bailiff. "Bring the witness." A door opened to the side, and 2 officers entered. The man accused of changing Tanya's life walked deliberately to the stand, attempting to appear calm, but his eyes repeatedly darted toward Milo, and Milo, who had been entirely relaxed until that moment, raised his head. Tanya didn't react, though her hold on the leash became a little firmer. No one observed it. The prosecutor rose, straightened her jacket, and started her questioning. "Mr. Banning, can you state where you were on the night of August 14th? Russell moved closer to the microphone. "At home, watching TV. "Alone?" "Yes." "And do you expect us to simply accept that?" He relaxed against the chair. "I'm being truthful." From the visitor's area, Kendra's hand squeezed the tissue once more. Tanya avoided his gaze, yet her breathing altered, a delicate, regulated rhythm, as if deliberately cultivating composure. The interrogation continued, initially focusing on establishing sequences of events. Then, the photographs were presented, images that should never be displayed in a courtroom. Tanya averted her eyes. Milo moved nearer to her. The atmosphere in the room diminished. The weight of the moment was palpable, not from the spoken words, but from their absence. Russell subtly adjusted his position. He asserted that her account was fabricated, interrupting the prosecutor's subsequent inquiry. "That dog," he commented, "is simply trained to respond. This entire situation is a fabrication." At that moment, Tanya deliberately raised her hand, positioning it behind her back. She then tapped her fingers twice, gently, The movement was subtle, barely perceptible. A missed blink would have meant overlooking it entirely. Milo's ears immediately rose. However, none of the individuals present anticipated what he would do next. Approximately 2 months prior to the court proceedings, Tanya was seated on a folding chair in her aunt's backyard in Decatur, Georgia, observing Milo pursue a red tennis ball across the lawn. The sun was beginning its descent, bathing the surroundings in a golden hue. She held the ball in her hand, but refrained from throwing it. Not yet. Her aunt, Carla Newsom, stood nearby with her arms crossed, a gentle smile gracing her features. Carla was resilient. A retired canine handler, she had previously worked in narcotics in Dallas before relocating closer to family. Around Tanya, that rigidity eased. Carla knelt beside her and met her gaze. "Are you certain you want to do this, dear?" she asked. "We don't have to if you're not ready." Tanya didn't respond immediately. She looked at Milo again, now lying on his back in the grass, tail thumping. Then she looked back at her aunt. "I don't want him to look at me," she said quietly. Carla nodded. "Then we'll teach Milo how to watch for you." It started gradually with simple games. Carla would often sit on the opposite side of the yard with a companion, role-playing as if they didn't know each other. If Tanya tapped her left shoe one time, Milo would remain still. If she tapped twice behind her back, Milo was trained to move and position himself between her and the person in front of her. This required consistent effort. Each day following school, and every weekend. Tanya was reserved, but she demonstrated a strong focus. Milo learned rapidly. He possessed a calm demeanor, intelligence, and above all, unwavering loyalty. Whenever he noticed Tanya exhibiting tension, he would instinctively move nearer. A strong bond was forming between them, a quiet and specialized team with a shared, unspoken mission. Carla observed them from the porch, occasionally recording observations, and, at other times, allowing them undisturbed time. On one evening following their work, Carla offered Tanya a bottle of water and sat close to her. "You need to understand that in court they may question your account," she stated cautiously. "Adults often feel anxious. They resist being proven incorrect." Tanya averted her gaze. "What if I make a mistake?" Carla reassured her. "You won't. And should you become overwhelmed, that's why Milo is present." He intended for them to recall his perspective. A moment of stillness followed. Then, an unusual inquiry from Tanya arose. "Do you believe he recalls what he inflicted upon me?" Carla remained silent. She preferred not to deceive. Therefore, she responded, "Perhaps not as you do, but individuals like him retain enough to be apprehensive of the truth." That evening, Kendra arrived to collect Tanya. Her gaze was weary, posture slumped. Carla drew her away before she re-entered the vehicle. "She possesses greater resilience than appears," Carla murmured. "Ensure she isn't bearing this burden by herself. When the moment arrives, meet that man directly." Kendra acknowledged, though her lips shook. Prior to their departure, Tanya returned and embraced Carla. "Thank you," she whispered against her shirt. Carla held her a little longer than normal. The day preceding the court appearance, they conducted one final meeting. Carla wore an old hoodie and mirrored sunglasses, attempting to replicate the courtroom environment. She even rehearsed a few assertive phrases she envisioned a lawyer might use. It wasn't ideal, but it provided assistance. Tanya signaled Milo. Milo positioned himself between her and Carla, remaining steadfast, vigilant, unwavering. Carla felt a constriction in her throat. "Okay," she stated, her voice softer than normal. It was one thing to be prepared, and another entirely to witness it unfold in actuality. Back in that courtroom in Toledo, Tanya remained perfectly still. Milo, now attentive, hadn't moved since she gave the double tap. Russell Banning observed a change in his posture, moving from relaxed to protective. His head rose, his chest moved forward, and his eyes focused intently on the man seated across the room. He subtly leaned away, holding the witness stand's edge. His expression grew strained, though he attempted to mask it with a forced smile. The gesture was not returned, neither by the jury, nor by the judge, nor even by his own attorney, who briefly looked at the dog with a worried twitch in his jaw. Andrea Selden, the prosecutor, paused briefly before resuming. Mr. Banning, you previously testified that you were by yourself on August 14th. There were no witnesses and no communication records like phone calls or text messages. Is that still your account? Russell moved his chair. That is what I stated, yes. Andrea approached him. You also affirmed that you had never encountered the minor involved in this case, correct? His gaze momentarily moved towards Tanya. Correct. I'm not familiar with her. Never spoken to her? No. Never visited her school? I said no. The atmosphere in the room became more subdued. The quiet rustling of papers had ceased. Every gaze was fixed on Tanya. She remained looking down, but Milo hadn't diverted his eyes from Russell. Not once. Judge Halberd leaned forward a little. Andrea turned to Tanya, her voice softening. Tanya, do you feel safe right now? Tanya didn't speak. Instead, she reached down and touched Milo's back. He didn't move, but the growl was so quiet, it almost sounded like a tremor. Just enough to be heard, enough to shatter the silence. Russell blinked. I want to be clear, Andrea stated, maintaining a calm tone. The dog had been specifically trained for her protection, under the direction of a certified canine handler. He is not reacting to anxiety, but to behavior. Gerald Lasky, the defense attorney, abruptly stood. Objection. This is speculative. Judge Halberd raised a hand. Sit down, Mr. Lasky. You will have your opportunity. Gerald resumed his seat, appearing unassured. Andrea approached the bench and picked up a small folder. Pursuant to the court's approval, I would like to present a short video documenting Tanya's therapy sessions. Permission granted, the judge stated. The screen descended behind the witness stand. A video commenced playing. It depicted Tanya in her aunt's backyard, peacefully walking with Milo. Carla appeared in the frame, portraying different scenarios. One tap, Milo remained by her side. Two taps. He advanced, his demeanor shifting similarly to how it had been in court. Following the video's conclusion, a significant silence ensued. Judge Halberd then addressed Russell directly. I have presided over many trials. I have encountered numerous courtroom dogs, therapy animals, and trained service animals. However, I have never witnessed an animal react with such immediate instinct. Russell attempted to speak, but remained silent. Tanya then raised her gaze, deliberately and quietly. Her voice, when she spoke, was gentle. He does not speak loudly. He only whispers. Andrea turned towards her with kindness. Who, dear? Tanya indicated the man on the stand. Him. A profound silence filled the courtroom. Russell rose quickly. This is a fabrication. Are you allowing a child and a dog to determine my fate? Milo advanced, his growl intensifying. The bailiff intervened swiftly. Sir, please be seated. However, Russell remained standing. He increased his volume. This isn't factual material. It's maneuvering, Milo stated, with a single distinct bark. The judge struck his gavel. Sufficient. Any further disruptions, and you will be ejected from this courtroom. Russell retreated to his chair, his face ashen. He mumbled something quietly, but it was inaudible. The jury observed intently, motionless. Tanya leaned back in her chair, her hand still on Milo's back. She remained silent. However, the truth was no longer concealed within the evidence or legal language. It was now plainly visible to all. One could sense the gravity of the situation. It wasn't a boisterous moment. It wasn't theatrical. It was silent, as if the atmosphere in the courtroom had been suddenly removed. Judge Halbert straightened his glasses and looked toward the bailiff. Let's take a 5-minute recess. He addressed the jurors. Please remain seated. The gavel struck the desk, yet there was no movement. There was no whispering, no throat clearing, only silence. Milo stood motionless, positioned before Tanya, gazing intently at Russell Banning as if he possessed prior knowledge of the outcome. Carla, positioned behind the barrier, made eye contact with her niece. She offered a slight nod, not to influence her, but to signal her presence. Weeks earlier, she had explained to Tanya that you don't need to be loud to anyone. The truth doesn't always need to shout. Sometimes it simply observes. That's what Milo was doing currently, observing, remaining still. Across the room, Russell was falling apart. He pulled at his collar, adjusted his posture, and spoke quietly to his attorney. His voice had changed, now more pointed and uncertain. The composed demeanor he's arrived with was gone, replaced by a noticeable unease. It was obvious to everyone. "Your Honor," Andrea said softly, easing the strain, "could the child please stay seated here with her support animal during the break?" The judge nodded. "She may remain seated as long as she is comfortable." Gerald Lasky, still red-faced, leaned toward Russell, whispering intensely. But his client appeared to be sweating now. Milo hadn't moved. He didn't bark again. He didn't growl again. He didn't need to. The prosecutor approached Carla close to the bench. Was that signal scheduled for today? Carla didn't blink. It was always a last resort. She had never used it until now. Andrea nodded slowly. He must have triggered it without even knowing. She knew what to look for, Carla said. He must have done it before. Back at the bench, Judge Halberd reviewed the footage again quietly on his monitor. His lips tightened. He'd been on the bench long enough to know that not all evidence fits neatly into paper or testimony. Sometimes it walks on four legs and growls when a child is too afraid to speak. Following the recess, the proceedings restarted as if no interruption had occurred. However, a change was palpable. "Your Honor," Andrea stated, rising to her feet, "with your permission, I would like to recall Detective Lorna Morales to the stand for a brief clarification." "Proceed," the judge responded. Detective Morales approached, her boots making a quiet clicking sound on the tile. She had been involved in the investigation from the beginning, when the available evidence consisted of a nebulous assertion and a child hesitant to articulate their account. Earlier, her statement had been concise. Andrea presented her with a printed photograph. "Detective, is this familiar to you?" Morales examined the image. It depicted Russell Banning at an elementary school field day, Tanya's school. He was not an employee. He was not a parent. He was simply a guest volunteer coordinated through a now-defunct mentorship program. Was this man permitted access to the children without supervision during the event? Andrea inquired. No, Morales stated directly. He was not. And was he discovered in a classroom alone with a student? Yes, Tanya Ellison. There it was. That was the moment Milo shifted again. His ears twitched. His body leaned forward just slightly, defensively again. Every juror's eyes followed that subtle movement. Andrea turned to the jury. "You observe the video. You observe the training. You observe the dog's instinct. Now you see why Russell stood up again. This is absurd. This is emotional manipulation." The bailiff took a step forward. Judge Halberd's voice rose. "Mr. Banning, please be seated. You're not permitted to speak again unless directly addressed." However, Russell couldn't restrain himself. "She is fabricating the story, fabricating it all with that dog." Milo advanced one step, displaying no bark, no growl, only his presence. It was then that a shift occurred. A single juror, an older woman wearing a blue sweater, removed her glasses and massaged her temples. Her gaze turned toward another juror, a younger man in his 30s. A shared understanding passed between them, as if a crucial element had finally aligned. However, what followed extended beyond simple validation. It concerned revealing the truth about this man and uncovering any concealed aspects of his character. The courtroom was now engrossed, anticipating each movement, observing every respiration, each involuntary gesture, and every look from Russell Banning. The jury members were no longer relaxed. They were intently focused. Judge Halbert massaged his eyes behind his spectacles. He remained largely silent, yet it was evident a change had occurred within him as well. He had witnessed numerous defendants falter under questioning, but Russell wasn't merely breaking. He was falling apart before their eyes. Andrea stepped back to the podium, her voice even and composed. "Detective Morales, did you interview any other parents who observed Mr. Banning interacting with students that day?" Morales responded, "Yes, 3 in total. Someone reported giving a child candy without authorization. Another stated they followed a student into the restroom. Was that student identified?" Morales confirmed. "Yes. You could hear someone in the gallery whisper, 'My God.'" Judge Halbert did not issue a reprimand. He remained silent. Gerald Lasky, attempting to reassert himself, rose. Your Honor, this is speculative. None of those allegations were substantiated, Andrea countered. The statements remained unchallenged, each one delivered before the victim had a chance to respond. Lasky's objection lingered, but it was not sustained. He then took his seat. Andrea turned back to the judge. I request permission to recall the school counselor, Ms. Jenna Holbrook, for follow-up, she stated. Granted, replied Halbert. Ms. Holbrook approached the stand with a quiet seriousness. She appeared to be in her mid-40s, with a thin but clear voice. She adjusted her blazer and spoke directly. Following the school event, I saw Tanya on several occasions. While she was quiet, she frequently drew. Her drawings consistently featured the same man, glasses, shirt, and always positioned behind her. Andrea presented the drawing to the judge and jury. Though a child's artwork, the likeness was undeniable. It depicted Russell, with the same square glasses and jawline. Notably, next to a small representation of herself, was a dog, Milo. She hadn't encountered Milo before this, correct? Andrea questioned, but not until weeks passed. A silence followed. Then Andrea faced Russell. Mr. Banning, can you clarify how a child you assert you've never encountered described you, including your glasses, weeks prior to any legal actions? Russell's lips parted. He closed them, then opened them again. I'm unsure, he mumbled. Perhaps she's disoriented or recalling something, Andrea suggested. The jury remained impassive. The entire courtroom did. Immediately afterward, the courtroom doors swung open. A woman entered discreetly and presented a note to the bailiff. He examined the note, then proceeded directly to the judge. Halbert received the paper, adjusted his glasses, and read it carefully. His eyebrows rose a little. Ms. Selden, he stated, it seems another person has come forward during the break. A former teacher's assistant from Hickory Trail Elementary. She asserts she possesses information directly relevant to this case. She's outside, prepared to testify. Andrea turned her head slowly toward Russell. Remarkably, Hickory Trail falls outside of this jurisdiction. Russell visibly struggled, his jaw tightening. Gerald Lasky moved closer, whispering to his client. Russell dismissed him. Nobody here knows anything, he mumbled. She's simply attempting to damage my reputation. Andrea stepped away. The doors opened once more. A woman, appearing to be in her early 30s, entered. Bridget Alston, her identification tag still attached to her coat. She assumed the witness stand, took the oath, and commenced her testimony. I remember him, she stated, indicating Russell. He volunteered at our school for 3 months in 2019. We received complaints, several, but they never resulted in action because people didn't want to trust the children. Judge Halbert moved closer. Did you file a report? Yes, on 2 occasions, but I was instructed not to escalate the matter. Andrea paused, allowing the jury a moment to process this information. Then Milo made a sudden, brief single bark. Russell visibly reacted. Tanya remained still. Without raising her head, she extended her hand and gave Milo a deliberate, comforting scratch behind the ears. The courtroom now comprehended. Milo's actions weren't erratic. He wasn't displaying distress. He was reacting purposefully, naturally, and with intention. However, what remained unknown was that the ultimate determination wouldn't be derived from the documented evidence. It would stem from the jury's visceral understanding. The courtroom was no longer impartial. It had taken a position, subtly but undeniably. The atmosphere was palpable, evident in the juror's posture, the judge's gesture of pressing his fingertips together, and the measured silence of Andrea Selden, which spoke volumes. The evidence was presented, but it was the responses that resonated. Milos's, Tanya's, and Russell's cut through the surrounding tension. Judge Halbert addressed the jury box, stating, "We will break for deliberation immediately. Jurors, you will be escorted to the conference room." As the jurors rose and exited, Russell slumped heavily into his chair. A slight tremor ran through his hands, though he attempted to conceal it by adjusting his cuffs. Gerald Lasky murmured something to him once more, but Russell offered no reply. His gaze was fixed on Tanya, and she, remaining silent and composed, averted her head. Milo settled back into a relaxed posture, his body curled beside her, his head resting on her shoe, as if the storm had subsided. As if his duties were complete, temporarily. The gallery stayed silent. The room remained still, save for Carla, who rose to stretch and walked over, placing a gentle hand on her sister's shoulder. Kendra hadn't seemed to breathe since the testimony began. Her fingers were red from repeated twisting. "You did well," Carla whispered. "You did better," she responded. The jury had been absent for almost 2 hours. Upon their return, the bailiff brought the room to order. Judge Halbert appeared more weary than previously, but his voice remained firm. "Have you reached a verdict?" The jury foreman, a middle-aged man with a weathered suit and a tight jaw, rose. "We do, Your Honor." The question came, "And how do you find the defendant, Russell Banning, on the count of criminal misconduct with a minor?" "Guilty," the foreman stated, the word falling with a weighty certainty. It resonated, clear enough for all present. "Regarding the count of trespassing on school property with intent to harm?" "Guilty." Russell Banning's shoulders slumped. He remained silent, offering no outburst. The outburst had ceased. Only a sense of quiet acceptance lingered. Andrea shut her binder. There were no celebratory gestures, no smiles, just a feeling of relief. Securing a case such as this doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like air flowing back into a space that was suffocated for too long. Judge Halbert addressed Tanya. "Ms. Ellison, I observe that you spoke sparingly today, but you conveyed more than many adults ever manage. And I believe you." Tanya remained composed, but she nodded. "And Milo," Halbert peered over his glasses. "I've never expressed this in a courtroom, but if I possessed a medal to award, he would be wearing it." A few people chuckled softly for the first time in hours. Subsequently, in the hallway outside the courtroom, reporters assembled. Microphones, cameras, the typical commotion. Kendra moved protectively before her daughter. "No questions today," she stated firmly. "We're simply going home." Carla opened the passenger door. Milo entered first. Then Tanya climbed in beside him. The car ride home was quiet. Carla remained silent. Kendra didn't press. However, halfway along the highway, Tanya spoke up. "Will he go away forever?" Kendra glanced in the rearview mirror. "I don't know, baby, but he won't hurt you again. That's for sure." Tanya stroked Milo's fur. He licked her hand. Upon arriving home, Carla hung up her coat and reached for the leash to walk Milo. Tanya followed her to the door. "Can I come?" "You don't have to." "I want to." Beneath a pale sky, they walked in silence. There were no cars, no barking, only the sound of gravel beneath their shoes. At one moment, Tanya paused and looked upwards. "Do you think other kids are scared like I was?" Carla nodded. Tanya fell silent for a moment. Then she inquired, "Can we teach other dogs, too?" Carla regarded her. This little girl who had once gone completely silent, now formulating plans. "Yeah," she replied softly. "I think we can." But this story wasn't simply about a dog or a courtroom. The focus was on the moment a child's experiences are finally validated, and when staying silent isn't the only path to safety. 2 weeks following the trial, subtle changes began to emerge. These weren't dramatic or obvious, but appeared in minor details that only a select few observed. Tanya was able to sleep soundly through the night without any awakenings. Kendra ceased the habit of leaving all the lights on in the house. And Milo, he stopped standing watch outside Tanya's bedroom door. He settled on her rug instead, peaceful, understanding his girl no longer needed to sleep with her shoes on. However, recovery isn't always linear. One afternoon, while Carla and Tanya were organizing dog toys in the living room, a letter arrived. Carla held the letter, glancing over to Tanya, who was now guiding Milo to stay with a simple hand signal. "You did that," she remarked. Tanya looked up. "No, we did." Carla smiled and settled down beside her. "You know what most people forget?" She continued. "Adults don't always have the answers." She paused. "But when kids speak, even if it's frightening, even if it's chaotic, it stirs something in everyone else." Tanya considered this briefly, then murmured, I didn't think anyone would believe me. Carla nodded. That's why your input was particularly valuable. Later that week, they went back to the backyard for the first time since Milo's training. Carla brought out an old duffel bag filled with harnesses and treats, and Tanya brought her sketch pad. She sat under the tree, sketching out commands, hand signals, and little notes only she could understand. Milo dozed nearby, one paw twitching in his sleep. Kendra came outside, holding 2 lemonades. I was thinking, she said, handing one to Carla. Perhaps we could discuss partnering with a local shelter and see if they would allow us to train a couple of dogs there. It would be a small undertaking, just a trial run. Carla raised her eyebrows. Are you certain? Kendra replied with a half smile. Yes, but I'm tired of being afraid. A few months later, they were conducting weekend sessions at a small training field in the city park. They called it Signals, and word spread slowly. Parents brought kids, shelters brought dogs. Some of the children didn't talk much, some didn't talk at all. Without fail, they appeared every Saturday. Even Milo, despite his advancing age, consistently attended. He remained silent, offering no barks or growls, but observed attentively. Tanya would position herself at the forefront, notebook in hand, providing instructions in concise, easily understood steps. A microphone was unnecessary. People drew near to listen. Periodically, she would look towards Carla, seeking confirmation. Carla would respond with a thumbs up, or occasionally simply offer a silent encouragement of "you got this." And Tanya succeeded. Individuals who had learned about the case would approach Tanya in public. Some offered thanks, while others remained silent, simply smiling and departing. Tanya didn't require recognition. She found satisfaction in the possibility that someone, somewhere, might now be more likely to believe child. One evening, while closing up the field, Carla asked her, "Do you ever wish that day in court had unfolded differently?" Tanya looked up from brushing Milo's fur. No, not even a little. She shook her head. If it hadn't occurred as it did, nobody would have witnessed who he truly was. Carla paused. The quiet confidence she held for her niece continued to surprise her. Prior to leaving, they paused before the small painted sign near the gate. It displayed Sig Nulls in red, with a paw print substituting the A. This was Tanya's suggestion. Carla placed her hand on Tanya's shoulder. You transformed something terrible into something that helps people, she said. Tanya smiled. He helped me first, she replied. She glanced down at Milo. He blinked up at her, his tail wagging softly. He no longer required instructions. He was already prepared, and perhaps that was the intention. It's often the case that those who appear least imposing possess the most profound insights. And frequently, the most subdued voices resonate most powerfully, particularly when someone or something offers unwavering support. If you've reached this point, thank you. Consider this a prompt to pay close attention, especially when interacting with children, and to trust their instincts when they express discomfort. You may be the only person to do so. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might benefit from hearing it. Remember, there's always someone waiting to be believed. Laughter followed the reserve girl, until a video appeared showing her protecting herself with remarkable composure, shifting the opinions of both Roosevelt High and the online community against her tormentor. If you inquired among the students at Roosevelt High about who held sway in the corridors, the response would invariably be one name: Brielle Wentworth. 17 years old, known for her quick wit and consistently ahead of the latest trends, Brielle was more than a senior. She was the senior. Brielle's father was a prominent corporate attorney in Sacramento, while her mother managed a luxury staging company for real estate. Their home in El Dorado Hills had been featured in a spread showcasing modern home design. She drove a graphite Range Rover, sported limited edition sneakers that were yet to be released, and possessed a TikTok following exceeding that of many local influencers. To those outside, Brielle appeared to have everything, and she was content with that perception. Each morning presented an opportunity for a performance. She entered school with a graceful, almost effortless stride. Impeccable hair, perfect lashes, AirPods in, iced coffee in hand. Girls aspired to be her, Boys observed her every move. Teachers expressed frustration, but even they acknowledged her intelligence. Just intelligent enough to avoid failing, never quite striving hard enough to fully challenge herself. That fall, senior year was progressing exactly as she'd envisioned. Prom committee, brand collaborations, homecoming queen virtually assured, no one jeopardized her position until Ayanna Brooks walked in. She arrived without fanfare, no elaborate smile, no designer handbag, just a simple canvas backpack, her braided hair neatly pulled back, and a subtle acknowledgement to the teacher. She had transferred from a charter school in Vallejo. A full scholarship, based on academic merit, was the extent of what anyone initially knew. She took a seat 2 rows in front of Brielle in AP Literature, and within the first week, murmurs began regarding her already achieving the highest grade in the class. Within 2 weeks, Mr. Daniels read aloud one of Ayanna's essays, not only to check for grammar, but because it genuinely affected him. Brielle disapproved of this. She didn't voice it, but a slight movement of her lip betrayed her feelings. The way her eyes focused intently when Ayanna responded to questions without notes, and the subtle sound she made when Mr. Daniels asked her to expand on what Ayanna had just said, all revealed her discomfort. Brielle had witnessed many new girls arrive and depart. Attractive girls, intelligent girls, unusual girls, but Ayanna was unlike any she's seen before. She made no effort to compete. She didn't flirt with teachers or seek attention, and that, in turn, made her stand out. In the cafeteria, Ayanna sat alone, not in a way that suggested sadness, but more as if she preferred it. She read during lunch, sometimes with earbuds in, sometimes not, consistently calm and unreadable. Brielle found it difficult to tolerate her composure. "She's acting like she's better than everyone," Brielle muttered to her friend Mackenzie one afternoon. Near the gym's vending machines, they stood. Mackenzie chewed her gum and gave a slight lift of her shoulders. She appeared reserved, perhaps even timid, Brielle observed. "No," Brielle stated directly. "She's strategic. One doesn't adopt an aura of innocence and grace unless it's intentional, meant to attract attention." This wasn't envy, Brielle reassured herself. It was about maintaining control. If others began to admire Ayanna's intelligence and composed demeanor, what would that signify for her? And what of the carefully constructed persona she had cultivated? It began subtly, with hushed comments near Ayanna's locker. Remarks like, "Oh wow, did you bring your thesis today?" Manufactured gasps occurred during roll call when Ayanna's name was called in multiple AP classes. There were also sarcastic comments about her library clothes and her perceived religious demeanor. Ayanna remained unfazed. She consistently attended, excelled on every quiz, and navigated the halls as if the behavior didn't affect her. Even when Brielle made eye contact and smirked, she received no response. However, this only escalated the situation. Brielle craved a reaction. She desired control. What she couldn't control worried her. However, a change was imminent, and not the kind Brielle anticipated. It began with Brielle posing a question just loud enough to be heard. Does she even talk? Or does she just blink Morse code? This occurred during AP statistics. Several students laughed quietly. Ayanna looked to the side, but continued her work. Mr. Fielding remained silent, but hesitated noticeably before resuming the lesson. Brielle smiled, and the others followed suit. She had established the atmosphere. Things became less difficult after that. It was almost natural. A contrived cough whenever Ayanna entered class. Disdainful eye rolls when she raised her hand. Brielle even began imitating the way Ayanna sat. Back straight, legs crossed, hands folded in an exaggerated and cartoonish way. Just enough for her friends to erupt in laughter. Ayanna made no reply, but she was aware. Naturally, she was aware. During one afternoon in the library, Ayanna was seated by the window, working on calculus problems. A junior, Sean, pulled a chair over to her and sat down without permission. "You don't talk much, huh?" he said. She looked up. "I talk, just not when I don't need to." "You think you're better than everyone? Or are you just antisocial?" She replied, "I think I'm trying to study." He scoffed, stood up, and walked away. Two girls near the printer chuckled. One of them murmured, "Attitude on silent mode." Ayanna didn't react visibly, though her pencil paused. Later that evening at home, her mother observed that she was uncharacteristically subdued. "You all right, sweetie?" she inquired, serving rice. Ayanna offered a slight movement of her shoulders. "The usual?" Her mom regarded her with a knowing glance, the kind reserved for moments when a child is troubled but not ready to share. Meanwhile, in El Dorado Hills, Brielle was eating dinner with her mom, checking TikTok while pushing around salmon she hadn't requested. "I heard the new girl aced the chem test," her mom said, not looking up from her phone. "Cool," Brielle replied. "Maybe she could tutor you." Brielle looked up slowly. "What?" "You know, if you want to bring your grade up before early decision apps are due." "She's not even applying to the same schools as me." "How do you know?" "I just know." Her mom didn't push further, but Brielle's jaw stayed clenched the rest of the meal. Back at school, the teasing moved into group chats. A meme depicting Ayanna studying by herself during lunch circulated online, accompanied by the caption, "Plotting her next essay to destroy us all." It spread through private stories, appeared repeatedly in comment sections, and evolved into a shared joke. Publicly, no one defended her. However, Ethan Mercado, a reserve student from AV Club, approached her at her locker one afternoon. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked. She looked up, visibly surprised. "Yeah, why?" She replied. "I've seen what's being said," he stated, "and I don't participate in the laughter." She nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said. He paused. "Have you ever wanted company during lunch, or something similar?" She didn't confirm, but she didn't decline either. Regardless, the stares continued. The whispers persisted, and Brielle kept observing, always from a distance, attempting to understand why Ayanna wasn't faltering. Then, one day in lit class, Mr. Daniels made an error. He returned essays. Ayanna's received a 99. Brielle's received a 72. He didn't comment verbally, simply distributing the papers as normal. However, Brielle noticed the grades and became upset. "Did you even read mine?" she asked, her voice sharp. The room fell silent. Mr. Daniels blinked. "Excuse me?" "You gave her a 99, and mine barely passes." Brielle responded, "If you have a question about your grade, we can discuss it after class," she said dismissively. "Whatever," he muttered. She kept her eyes on the desk, her pen tapping lightly. After class, Ethan approached Ayanna again. "She's scared of you, you know." Ayanna shook her head. "She just doesn't understand me. She doesn't want to." This was a critical moment. Brielle felt a surge of fear, knowing she was on the verge of an action that would dramatically alter circumstances. This time, the entire student body of Meadowbrook High would witness it. Thursday afternoon felt interminable, heavy with humidity. The air conditioning in the school cafeteria had been unreliable throughout the week, contributing to an already strained atmosphere. Brielle, feeling listless and agitated, rested her chin on her hand, gazing across the room at Ayanna from her tray of uneaten chicken nuggets. Ayanna was in her usual spot, near the far windows, eating quietly with a paperback, Things Fall Apart, beside her tray. Brielle scowled. "Naturally, she's reading something with a title like that," she murmured. Mackenzie looked up, questioning. "You're still focused on this? She seems to think she's special." "Exactly," Brielle retorted. "And people are treating that like it's a positive thing." Mackenzie paused. "So, are you suggesting you want to throw food at her?" "No," Brielle stated. She wanted to allow her a brief pause. It was then that the concept began to develop. She involved Zach and Nina, two juniors eager to gain her favor. They possessed access to the AV Club's green screen equipment and a copy of the morning announcements video. Within less than a day, they created a fabricated segment. Ayanna's face was superimposed onto an old news anchor's body, accompanied by robotic audio. The title read, "Ayanna Brooks proclaims herself queen of Roosevelt High." It was foolish, yet well executed. It appeared remarkably authentic. The strategy? To broadcast it during morning announcements just before the start of second period. And it succeeded. Initially, that Friday morning, immediately following the Pledge of Allegiance, the video began playing. For a moment, many students paused, visibly confused. Then laughter erupted. It was loud, unpleasant, and reverberated through the hallways. Ayana was in third period English when she heard about it. A sophomore rushed into the classroom, holding a phone, and showed her the video. "Yo, Ayana, did you see this?" he said, still laughing. She didn't respond. She simply looked at the screen, her own face appearing warped, her voice sounding mechanical and derisive. She blinked once, then closed her eyes firmly, as if attempting to erase everything. Afterward that day, Brielle encountered her in the hall. "Hey," she said gently, "I enjoyed your short presentation this morning." Ayana halted her movement, turned deliberately. Their eyes connected, truly connected for the first time. And for a brief instant, Brielle sensed something. Not regret, but a trace of doubt. As if she wasn't certain anymore who held the advantage. That night, Ayana sat at the kitchen table, her laptop closed, tea growing cold beside her. Her mom sat across from her. "They're messing with you again?" Ayana nodded. "You want me to call someone?" "No, it'll make it worse." Her mom leaned forward. "Baby, what they're doing isn't just teasing anymore. It's harassment." Ayana's jaw clenched. "They're waiting for me to snap. I'm not giving them that." Her mom studied her face. "You sure?" Ayana's voice was low. "I'm sure." Her hands trembled beneath the table. The following morning, she arrived at school wearing black leggings and a plain hoodie. She carried nothing but her phone, no books, no backpack. She proceeded directly past the main office, bypassing her locker, and headed straight to the gym. There, she sat silently on the bleachers as the warm-ups began. The girls' volleyball team observed her. Coach Ramirez noticed her and came over. "Ayana, is everything all right?" he asked. "I just need to use the gym after school. Is that a problem?" He appeared puzzled but nodded. There were only 15 minutes between practice and basketball. That was all the time she had. She thanked him, and she waited. After school, Ayana returned. Coach had left the mats out. She took one to the center of the floor and placed her bag next to it. For the subsequent 15 minutes, she moved. Fluidly, sharply, powerfully. Snap kicks, elbow strikes, pivot turns. Breathe. Reset. Again. There wasn't any music. There was no audience. Just motion. Just discipline. She was unaware that someone had entered. She was completely unaware that he had recorded it. It was Ethan. He remained silent, simply observing. His hand trembled almost imperceptibly as he pressed record. Later that night, he posted a 19-second clip with the caption, "They picked the wrong one." No tags, no names, just movement, precision, focus. The video quickly gained attention, and once it spread, nothing at Roosevelt would ever be the same. By Monday morning, the clip had reached over 200,000 views. No names, no faces. A young woman in a hoodie moved with the precision of an action film star. Her movements were seamless, accurate, and completely controlled. The video gained widespread attention on TikTok, sparking numerous reactions. Users created stitched videos attempting to replicate her kicks, and the comment section was filled with speculation. Who was she? She executed every movement flawlessly. It was evident she had received training, though at Roosevelt High, the truth wasn't widely known. Not yet. In first period, Brielle was seated with her feet resting on the desk, using her phone. She watched the video, paused, and tilted her head. "She looks familiar," she muttered. By lunch, someone had made the connection. Ayana's name began circulating through the halls again. But this time, the tone was different. Less ridicule, more inquisitiveness, and something else Brielle hadn't experienced before. Respect. "She's the one from the video. I thought she was just a nerd." "Yo, she's genuine." Brielle sensed it. The change. Not a complete takeover, but its initial stage. She began to notice hushed conversations that excluded her. Praise that wasn't directed at her. The shifts were minor, yet they caused her distress. That afternoon, she confronted Ayana near the science wing. Ayana was walking alone, wearing earbuds and a hoodie. She paused when Brielle blocked her path, arms crossed. "You think you're clever, huh?" Brielle said. Ayana removed one earbud. "What? Are you trying to go viral now? Playing the humble angle?" Ayana blinked deliberately. "I didn't post that video." Brielle let out a scoff. It seemed like a coincidence that this appeared just as people started calling her strange. Ayana remained still, composed. You know what your problem is? Brielle moved closer. You carry yourself as if you're above speaking to anyone, and then you act surprised when people don't care for you. I don't act surprised, Ayana replied quietly. Brielle's cheeks reddened. She glanced around. Several students nearby had paused, observing, watching, waiting. I'm warning you, Brielle hissed. Ayana turned to leave. Then Brielle pushed her. The push wasn't forceful, but it was calculated, public enough to draw attention, and loud enough to elicit gasps. Ayana faltered slightly, regained her balance, and turned to face Brielle. They held each other's gaze for a drawn-out moment. Subsequently, Ayana reacted. She avoided striking Brielle. Instead, she intercepted the subsequent push with such speed that Brielle's wrist rotated, throwing her off balance. Ayana then moved to her side and resumed her position. The entire exchange concluded in fewer than 3 seconds. The incident was recorded on a phone. It captured the precise moment Ayana's foot landed, the subtle movement of Brielle's arms, Ayana's stillness, her unwillingness to retaliate. This new video surpassed the initial one, spreading rapidly. By that evening, news organizations had begun contacting Roosevelt High. Some described it as a display of controlled self-defense. Others characterized it as the moment the reserved girl silenced everything. Ayana remained silent, making no social media posts or tweets. She remained silent regarding the online discussions. She simply attended school Tuesday morning, holding her head high and with her hoodie unzipped. Surprisingly, there was no laughter, neither in the hallways, nor in the cafeteria, and not even within the group chats. Brielle, however, struggled to reach third period before others began to avoid her. This wasn't due to fear, but rather embarrassment. The question lingered. Why would she push her? What prompted her to touch her? Everyone saw the video. Ayana hadn't even thrown a punch. Brielle attempted to explain. She tried to make light of the situation. No one paid attention. And for the first time in her life, Brielle Wentworth felt truly observed. Not in the manner she had constructed her existence. However, the significant consequences were yet to unfold. They wouldn't start until individuals began taking sides. By midweek, Ayana Brooks was a name recognized beyond Sacramento. A local channel broadcasted the video, presenting a brief report. Student defends herself with poise after being confronted at school. The martial arts studio in Vallejo shared a clip of her, commending her technique and poise. A Reddit user discovered earlier footage of her competing in a junior nationals tournament when she was 10 years old. She had secured gold. Consequently, Ayana transitioned from being a reserve scholarship student to a subject of public attention. At Roosevelt High, a palpable change occurred. Teachers discussed her in break rooms, and guidance counselors conducted private meetings. Several parents emailed the school inquiring about plans to handle bullying following recent occurrences. Brielle was experiencing a significant amount of it. She attempted to appear unaffected, arriving at school wearing sunglasses and large hoodies, feigning a lack of distress. However, the pain persisted. Each time someone ignored her, each time Ayana's name was mentioned without including hers, she felt deeply hurt and recalled Mr. Daniels' words. Courage sometimes is saying nothing at all. Demonstrating his actions through silence, he looked towards Ayana, who remained unengaged. Brielle felt a constriction in her chest. During lunch, she joined Mackenzie and Zach, but the table felt desolate. Discussions became uncomfortable. People avoided mentioning the unspoken, that perhaps Brielle had overreacted, that perhaps Ayana was not at fault. Compounding the situation, her supporters began to criticize her. The remarks on her most recent post were harsh. Didn't you push her? Why are you upset that she's talented? You've contributed to why people distrust popular girls. Brielle deactivated her comments, then her DMs, then her account. At home, she forcefully closed her laptop and tossed her phone across the room. Her mother gently knocked, opened the door slightly. Would you like to talk? No. You've been unusually silent recently. I'm fine. You're not. I said I'm fine. Silence. Then her mom's voice, soft. Sometimes when it feels as though everything is falling apart, it's simply the truth revealing itself. The door closed again. Returning to school, Ayana remained unchanged. She carried herself without needing to demonstrate anything. Her clothing was the same. She showed no signs of boasting. She didn't mention the events that transpired. She simply proceeded through the day as before. That silence, which Brielle had previously disliked, was now the quality people admired the most. She was no longer simply the girl who kicked. She was something more, something Brielle had never taken the time to comprehend. Even Ethan observed this. He located her close to the lockers on Thursday afternoon, immediately following class. "You okay?" he inquired. Ayana offered a weary smile, acknowledging his presence. People are supporting you, right?" He continued. "I'm not attempting to create factions." Ayana responded, "I understand." "But you unintentionally did," he stated, simply by remaining still. She hesitated. "I didn't desire any of this." He replied, "I know." Nearby, Brielle observed their conversation. For the initial time, she wasn't experiencing anger. Instead, she felt bewildered by the recognition Ayana was receiving. It wasn't popularity, it was genuine respect. It lacked fanfare and wasn't staged. It required no enhancements or labels. It simply existed. Brielle sat in her car after school, observing her reflection in the rearview mirror. Not the mascara or the precise eyeliner, not the carefully constructed image she typically presented. Just a girl uncertain of her identity without the attention. But even she couldn't escape the upcoming moment, the one that would ultimately compel a discussion neither of them was prepared for. The rain fell steadily on Friday as Brielle uttered the words that surprised everyone, even herself. She discovered Ayana standing beneath the shelter outside the East Gym, waiting for her bus amidst the storm. Most students had already departed for the day. Brielle paused for a moment, her designer boots already wet, her hair beginning to frizz. Ayana noticed her approach, but remained still. "I need to speak," Brielle said, her voice quiet. Ayana blinked. "Then speak." "I was wrong," she said. "I'm not saying that for the internet or to fix my reputation. I didn't know how to deal with you," Brielle continued. "You were quiet, intelligent. People appreciated you without any effort on your part. That worried me." "You don't need to offer an explanation," Ayana stated. "Actually, I do, because I invested months believing I had to be everything, constantly, flawless, boisterous, well-liked. And then you arrived and didn't attempt to be anything other than yourself. Yet people still acknowledged you, as if you were significant. I don't need you to like me," Ayana said softly. "I know. That's why it affected me." The rain continued to fall. Ayana folded her arms. "You humiliated me, openly, on multiple occasions." "I know," Ayana replied. "You caused people to believe I was vulnerable. I initially thought you were," Brielle confessed. "But you're not." A silence followed. "I've been observing that video," Brielle added. "Not the one where you blocked me. The other one. At the gym. You appeared focused, in control, as if nothing could disrupt you." Ayana looked at her, her expression unreadable. "Why now?" she asked. "Because I finally stopped talking long enough to listen," Brielle responded. At that moment, Ethan appeared, standing a few feet away with his backpack over one shoulder. He didn't interrupt. He simply looked at Ayana, as if assessing the situation. Ayana gave him a slight nod before turning back to Brielle. "I don't need an apology. I needed space." "You've already taken enough," Brielle said, biting her lip. "So we're just done?" Ayana stated. "We were never anything. You don't have to be the antagonist in your own narrative. However, I am not here to be your path to improvement." Brielle remained silent. There was nothing further to communicate. She turned and proceeded into the rain. Ayana lingered for a moment, simply inhaling. Afterward that evening, she settled on the couch with her mom, wearing warm socks and a throw blanket. "How was school?" her mom inquired. Ayana paused. "Complex," her mom replied with a smile. "Isn't that just life?" Ayana chuckled. "A gentle, genuine one." Roosevelt faced challenges, yet progress was evident. Mr. Daniels began incorporating essays centered on character development. Students who had previously remained silent were now addressing instances of minor misbehavior. Even the school board initiated a limited program focusing on bullying, student support, and mental health. However, the most significant shift was in the way individuals interacted. They observed each other with curiosity rather than pity or a focus on social standing. At some point, the quiet began to offer them a lesson. One afternoon, Mackenzie sat beside Ayanna in the cafeteria. There was no apology, no casual conversation. Just two girls eating together quietly. It needed nothing more. And Brielle? She hadn't been posting as much lately. She began arriving to class promptly. She joined the yearbook team, working behind the camera, not in front of it. It wasn't about improving her public perception. She simply needed something genuine for a change. Ayanna never went viral again. She didn't require it. She possessed what was essential. Her grades, her strength, her boundaries, her voice, even when she chose not to use it. However, the world hadn't forgotten, and neither had she. Certain events don't gain widespread attention. They remain with you. And that's where genuine transformation takes place. 2 months later, Roosevelt High appeared unchanged. Same lockers, same lunch lines, same morning announcements. Yet, a subtle alteration was perceptible. The focus that used to hold the greatest importance. Who possessed the latest shoes? The social gatherings faded. The meaning of respect evolved. It wasn't expressed through enthusiastic applause, boisterous cheers, online likes, or shares. Instead, it manifested in understated moments of genuine connection. For example, when a freshman dropped her books, four students immediately helped her without a word exchanged. Or when a newcomer sat alone, another person simply asked, "You want company?" While imperfections remained, people began to reflect more deeply. There was a deliberate pause before jokes were made, and a focus on checking in rather than immediately joining in. Ayanna remained near the windows in the cafeteria. She continued to wear her hoodie on some days and still carried herself with a sense of self-assuredness. People now acknowledged her with small gestures, a wave, a smile, a casual greeting, not because they sought anything from her, but because they had finally recognized her for who she truly was. Ethan also stayed around. They didn't talk every day, but when they did, their conversations held significance. "You still training?" he asked one day as they walked out of school. "Yeah," she replied. "Every week." "Will she compete again?" She shrugged. "Possibly. Or perhaps not. I'm not doing it to win," she explained. "To focus. To stay grounded," she added, smiling. Regarding Brielle, she was still in the process of understanding things. Certain days, she reverted to previous patterns. The sarcasm, the desire for control. However, she would then recognize it, offer apologies when she previously wouldn't have, assist with tasks that went unacknowledged, share in someone else's humor without needing to be the focus. Change isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's subtle, quietly, internally. Mr. Daniels emphasized a point in class one day that resonated with both of them. Respect, he stated, is not something you demand. It's something you earn, frequently through how you treat people when you believe no one is observing. Ayanna recorded the words in her notebook, not because she required the reminder, but because it felt like a meaningful return. People ceased inquiring about what truly occurred in that video. It was irrelevant now. They had witnessed the authentic story unfold over weeks, not found in video snippets. Instead, consider the decisions made. These actions carry greater significance than fleeting online sensations. The world continued, as it invariably does. However, certain students at Roosevelt progressed. They gained wisdom, developed empathy, and became slightly more observant. Occasionally, when unnoticed, Ayanna would stop while walking down the hallway, observe her surroundings, and recognize a truth. She remained unchanged, yet those around her had evolved, and that was sufficient. Occasionally, the most impactful decision you can make is remaining authentic, even when all eyes are on you, anticipating collapse. It isn't necessary to be vocal to be acknowledged. It isn't required to struggle to prevail. And it isn't essential to alter yourself to gain respect. Allow your actions to demonstrate. Let your boundaries remain firm, and let your silence convey the significance that clamor cannot. If this story prompted a shift in your perspective regarding how we treat others or redefined your understanding of true strength, please like this video and subscribe. More stories are forthcoming that challenge assumptions and remind us that character isn't developed during times of ease. It's demonstrated when faced with adversity. Thank you for watching. Remain steadfast